I'm very honored to invite two strong and inspiring women, Israel Hayom publisher Dr. Miriam Edelson, and, of course, former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Mrs. Nikki Haley.
Shalom, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. In Hollywood, Israel Wonder Woman is Gal Gadot. But on the world stage, Israel Wonder Woman is another woman, a real woman, a woman who we are privileged to have with us here today on this stage in Jerusalem. She is a woman blessed not only with beauty, but also with brains and bravery. Ladies and gentlemen, Nikki Haley.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mary.
Nikki has been known by many titles: governor, ambassador, Republican leader, and potential first female president of the United States. For Israelis, or for anyone who cares about the Israeli-US relationship, she has a far simpler and more powerful title: friend. Throughout her public service, Nikki has shown those greatest of American traits: moral clarity and courage. Until just a few months ago, she was America's top envoy to the United Nations. She put the fear of God into the God-forsaken place. She stood up to bullies. She called out hypocrites. She confronted countries that are happy to get money and protection from the United States, but not to support it in return. And Nikki defended Israel, always, openly, without hesitation or any apology, and often in defiance of other world power. She did so, I believe, because she knows that Israel is good. And she did so because she knows that the United States is never stronger, never more credible than when it honors its allies. Well, now is a chance for us to honor her back. Ladies and gentlemen, another round of applause for Nikki Haley.
Thank you.
So, first thing first, what shoes are you wearing now?
Always wearing heels.
High heels. I asked because you once said that you wore heels to the United Nations so you could kick anyone you saw doing the wrong thing. Seriously now, looking back, did it approach work?
It was the only approach we could use. I mean, here you had a situation where there's this organization of 193 countries. They're anti-American. They're anti-Israel. They continue to give us a hard time, but they continue to have their hands out asking for aid instead. And so I didn't want to go there and just be another ambassador. I wanted to go there and make sure that we changed things and that we moved the ball. I felt like the American people deserved that because they were paying a lot of money for the United Nations and we weren't getting a return on our investment. And so the only option was to go in, make sure that the ambassadors knew what the United States was for, what the United States was against, and then never apologize for it and continue to move forward.
So you wouldn't do it differently?
I would not do it differently. The truth needed to be said. It needed to be said clearly, and it needed to be said without any apology.
This is busy time for U.S. diplomacy in the Middle East. Just this week, the Trump administration held a conference in Bahrain that was meant to help the Palestinian economy as part of the US peace plan. The Palestinians did not go to Bahrain. They have already rejected the peace plan, even though they have not seen it. And they are not even talking to the Trump administration. Is this all waste of time, Nikki?
Working towards peace is never a waste of time. We should all want peace. We should all want to see a peace plan be successful. I will tell you that the work that Jared Kushner and Jason Greenblatt have put into this plan, this is not just a few sentences on a page. I have seen the plan. It's very well thought out. It's detailed. It's doable. And it does things that would improve the lives of the Palestinians, yes, but it doesn't compromise the national security of Israel. And those are the two components we desperately need to see. And so I think that what we've done is, certainly tried to lay the groundwork. I think the Trump administration has been courageous in the way that they said, we're going to push for this and try and do our part. I mean, look, we're not going to beg the Palestinians to come to the peace table, but it really says a lot about the Palestinian Authority that they wouldn't want better for their own people. That's the sad part, because the Palestinians do deserve better. The problem is if their own leaders don't want them to have more, they're never going to get it. I do think that what's coming off of a very successful conference, from what I can tell in Bahrain, shows another approach, which is the Palestinians may not want to come to the table, but if their neighbors want them to come to the table, then it's a totally different ballgame. And I think that the Arab community will see over time they can't continue to babysit the Palestinians. The Americans have already said, we won't babysit the Palestinians. And so I think it's time for them to step up.
If the Palestinians insist on rejecting the deal, what should Israel do? Should it declare that Judah and Samaria are its sovereign territory, like Jerusalem and Golan?
I think we should see how the peace plan plays out. I mean, I think that we should give this a chance. I think everyone should be open-minded as we go into it. I mean, I think if you look at Jerusalem, that was stating a fact. Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. No matter what the Arab countries were telling the Palestinians, that is the truth. And I think the Trump administration was very courageous in saying, we're not going to deny the truth anymore. We're going to acknowledge what is real. We have all of our embassies in the capital of countries. Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, so why wouldn't the American embassy be there? And I think that was the first thing. When it comes to the Golan Heights, I mean, I think you look at the fact that we're not going to let Assad have that back, but the people there don't want it to go back to Syria. So those were two that we were able to move the ball on. And I think now we just have to see where the Palestinians are, but this is really a moment of truth for them. Do they want to continue to live the way they're living and accept it, or do they want to see what opportunity could look like? It's all in their hands now.
Thank you. Why is Israel mistreated and singled out at the UN? Why does the UN typically condemn Israel's response to an attack rather than the attack itself?
It's interesting because for a while I wanted to see exactly what was the anti-Israel bias about. When I first got there, I had heard about it, but didn't think much of it until I attended the first Middle East session, which, by the way, is not about the Middle East. It's not about Syria. It's not about Yemen. It's not about Hezbollah. It's not about Hamas. It's only about Israel. And when I sat in that first session and heard ambassador after ambassador just bash Israel, just because they always had, it was disgusting. And so that's when we said, we're not going to allow this to happen anymore. There are too many other issues in the Middle East we need to talk about. And so every meeting, I would talk about another threat in the Middle East that we should be worried about. And over time, you saw other ambassadors start to do that because the fact was they were embarrassed. What I do think has happened is The Arab countries realized after the 1967 war that they were never going to defeat Israel. So they did the only thing they knew they could, was go after Israel in the UN and do it diplomatically. And because of the wealth of those countries, because of the oil, they went to all the little countries and said, you need to be voting with us. That's what started it. Now it's time to end it. Because behind closed doors, so many of those ambassadors respect Israel. Not, the Arab community is the Arab community, but when you look at the other small countries of the 193, there are so many that actually respect the strength and intelligence of Israel. And so I think that what we did was we allowed them to suddenly stand up for the first time and not be alone. And I have to say to my friend and my partner and the person that really I so enjoyed working with, Danny Danone, was just an amazing ambassador at the United Nations.
How can we fight back?
We fight back by calling them out every single time. We call them out every time they tell a lie. We call them out every time they try and create their own truth. We call them out when they think we're not watching. And we never let our guard down. Because the more we called them out, the less they would do it. And it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of effort, but the truth is always worth fighting for. And I think that we have to continue to do that. I will continue to do it my own way. I think the President will continue to do it in his way. I think Ambassador Friedman and Jason and all of those who've worked so hard to fight for the American-Israeli alliance, we fight for that not just because we want to help our ally and friend Israel, but a strong Israel makes a strong America. And so we need everyone to acknowledge the value of Israel. I mean, it is the one bright spot in a really rough neighborhood. And we need to continue to show that the democratic values and the freedoms and all of the things that Israel encompasses, the Middle East actually wants. And so the better and stronger we make Israel, the safer we make the world.
At the UN, you exposed the lie of the Palestinian refugee narrative that they count as refugees anyone whose parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents were displaced in the 1948 war. Just so we are clear, what is the true number of Palestinian refugees as far as the United States is concerned?
The number of actual Palestinian refugees is classified. There are multiple people working on it right now to unclassify it, and I think we should unclassify that number because I think it speaks through to the truth of what that whole scenario is. I personally really looked into UNRWA and the Palestinian refugees because when I first got to the UN, I wanted to find out what they did, what we could do to improve situations. And what I found was an agency that didn't want to be told what to do. They didn't want to reform. The way they count refugees is basically saying that any Palestinian, any place in the world is a refugee because it doesn't matter if you have citizenship in another country. They want to give it for generations going forward, and nowhere else in the world are refugees counted like that. And so UNRWA would go around to the United Nations and always complain that the United States wasn't doing enough. The United States has given the Palestinians over $6 billion. We've done our part. So when the United States goes to UNRWA and says, we think you should reform, we think you should change the way you have your textbooks, we think the way you should change how you count refugees, and they tell us, no, we can't do it. And then they turn around every year. It's like a fundraiser. Every year they say their schools are going to close. And I finally had a conversation with the president. I said, I promise you, they won't close because it's nothing more than a fundraising tactic. So when they weren't willing to do our reforms and they weren't willing to acknowledge the truths that we wanted to, the president was courageous enough and said, no more. We're not going to give any more aid to UNRWA. And on top of that, We were giving more than all of the Arab countries combined. Why would the United States be responsible for the Palestinians when their own brothers and sisters in the Arab community won't be responsible for them?
Exactly. Sounds like it's jumped through the genes, being refugee. This is the first time I hear about it.
No, it's true, but not only that, the United States didn't give aid, and the schools never closed.
War with Iran?
We don't want war. The president doesn't want war. None of us should want war. But I think we have to be true to the fact that Iran is the #1 threat that we're facing now. And I think that we also have to be true to the fact that the Obama administration didn't help at all. I mean, I think that they went in, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, well-intentioned, that they thought they could bring peace. But all they did, after sending a plane full of money to Iran, was spread terrorism. Everything was worse, whether it was with Hezbollah in Lebanon. You look at Yemen, you look at Syria, you look at Afghanistan, and Iraq, all of these areas, Iran's tentacles started going everywhere, and they started to become more confident. And the Europeans, while they are our brothers and sisters, their egos got in the way because it was very clear the deal didn't work. The president was right to get out of the Iran deal because what you had was the Iranians were still testing ballistic missiles. They were still selling weapons and doing weapons transfers. They continued to support terrorism around the world, and we were giving them money to do it. And so the president rightly said, we're going to get out of the Iran deal. Their money has dried up. The Europeans have tried to save them, and they can't. And now we're seeing a panicked Iran. And what we have to realize is defunding them slowed down the nuclear process, but it didn't stop their culture of hate. They're still saying death to America. They're still saying death to Israel. And as long as they're doing that, we have to have very strong messages and let them know that one thing that goes out of line, we will respond, and we'll respond harshly.
Thank you. You are now in private sector, but we hope not for a long. Is there any chance that you will announce here and now in Jerusalem that you plan to run for the president in 2024?
Well, I think that the air in Jerusalem brings clarity. And I can say with great clarity that I know I'm too young to stop fighting. I do know that. I know that I'm too passionate about a lot of issues. But I am also very much enjoying private life. And I will continue, whether it's helping President Trump, whether it's fighting on the issues that I have, I will continue to be loud and proud about all the things that are important, and I will find my own way in what that is. 2024 is a long ways away, and politics, 1 year in politics is a lifetime. But, what I can tell you with great clarity is I'll never stop fighting for what the U.S. believes in. I'll never stop fighting for Israel, and I'll never stop fighting for the bond that we have together.
I know you. I met you much earlier, before you were the United Nations envoy, the American one, and I remember meeting you, yes. And you always protected Israel.
Well, and I just want to say, and take a point of personal privilege, it's so great to see Sheldon out tonight. I told him he looks stronger and better than I've seen him in a long time. But so much of what has happened in Israel, I hope that everyone realizes Sheldon and Miriam have always been a big part of that. And a lot of the strength that the U.S. is showing for Israel, they've been in the sidelines and they've been behind the scenes, but they've been very involved. And we thank you for that because you've been very, very good to us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nikki, is there a difference between what country representatives say and do publicly at the United Nations and what they say to you privately behind the scenes?
Couple of things. One that was very interesting was after the president issued the attacks on Syria, when Assad used the chemical weapons on so many people, when the president actually issued those strikes, It was amazing the number of ambassadors that texted, pulled me to the side, or called me and said, it's so good to see the U.S. lead again. And I think that it's that American leadership that those ambassadors want to see. And I think that that's the same reason that when we talk about what Israeli leadership can mean to the world and what Israeli leadership means to America, it is important for us to say that because it's heard, it's listened to, and I think that we're starting to see a shift. And I think that that shift is acknowledging the truth that we are blessed to have Israel in the Middle East. We need Israel. And I think that even the Arab countries, in their own way, recognize that they're going to have to deal with this. And the truth is, I have always said, you can't destroy what God has blessed. And Israel is blessed.
If you bless Israel, you are blessed. If you curse Israel, you are cursed. Last question, Nikki. One of the iconic images of you at the United Nations shows you holding up your hands to vote no on the Security Council draft resolution that would have condemned America for moving its embassy to Jerusalem. What did it feel like? Why was the fight to move the embassy so difficult at the United Nations?
It was one of my proudest moments. I mean, the idea that I could issue the veto for the fact that they were trying to tell us what was our sovereign right. We had every right to put the embassy wherever we wanted to put it. And the United Nations came after the U.S. hard. They did it in the Security Council, but then they did it in the General Assembly. And to be able to stand up and defend our right and our sovereignty and our friendship with Israel was a very proud moment. And I think that it was one that they were trying to humiliate the United States, and they were trying to humiliate Israel. And in the end, both of us came out stronger.
That's all. That's all what we have time, unfortunately. Nikki, thank you. Thank you for joining us here tonight. And thank you for being a friend, a real friend, and God bless you.
God bless you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Haley, and thank you, Dr. Edelson, for this interesting talk. Now I have the great honor to invite to the